Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Woods of Desolation, The Falling Tide, out December 9th on Season of Mist. This album has 6 tracks, 36 minutes in length, and this is the band's 4th full-length studio album. They are an Australian black metal band. From a design point of view, this album is straightforward. There's not much there to say. It's a record that has 6 songs, 36 minutes. There's not a lot of time or room to play with. It stays linear, it stays compact, it stays cohesive. It definitely takes you on a path, and that path has an interesting journey from start to finish. The only hiccup in this design is the song The Passing. Not that the song is not good, it's just that it's an instrumental track that comes at a weird time in the overall feel and design of the album. This song is number 5 on the track listing. I felt like the song with these specific characteristics would have worked better as either the opening track, because it would set the mood for the atmosphere of the record, or as the closing track because it would close the mood of that same atmosphere that the album offered. To have it at number 5, you have to better connect the song with either the track that came before or the song that comes after. This way you have more added value to the experience of listening to the whole record. It feels like you're getting an extended version of a single track. The way that it sits, it doesn't hurt the album, but it doesn't help the fluidity to be uninterrupted, which I think is really what you want in an album that has this sort of design, that has this sort of sound approach. And as far as sound is concerned, 2 things have to be said. This is a heavy, atmospherically driven album. That's undeniable. The other thing that has to be said is that the mixing on this record is phenomenal. The atmosphere that the album has, a lot of it is driven by how the album is mixed. And it comes across in 2 different fronts. First of all, you look at the sound, how the 2 main core elements integrate with one another or cooperate with one another. And those 2 elements are drums and guitars. When you're listening to this album, you're going to see one thing come to the surface. Sometimes the drums are on a separate lane from the guitars, and it's clear as day, completely divided from one another. You feel the warmth of the drums, but you also feel how clean, how crisp that sound is. And you look at the guitars on a separate lane, and they have a little bit more grime. They're a little bit more dark, they're a little bit more gritty, and they definitely have a cold embrace in terms of the sound that they put forward and the impact that that sound then has in the overall atmosphere of the songs. When the 2 come together, the drums lose a lot of that warmth, they lose a lot of that cleanliness that they have, and they become as dirty as the guitar sound is. So the whole experience becomes a lot darker, a lot grimier, a lot more intense, and a lot more aggressive. This helps push the album forward, song in and song out, and at the same time, this movement that these 2 elements offer create a lot of ebbs and flows from track to track and within tracks themselves. This is the lifeline of the overall sound experience of this album and how that atmosphere comes in and out. Because when the drums and guitars separate from one another, the album becomes more atmospheric. When they go back together, the album brings in that black metal essence into the forefront and becomes a lot more driven. Then you have the vocals. How do the vocals interact with this internal struggle, with this internal movement? Well, the vocals have a very interesting approach. They are very consistent from beginning to end. You get the same style, the same feel, the same vibe. And they're consistently aggressive, dark, and brutal. They come from a very deep place within the record, but they don't come from a deep place staying within the deep place. They come from a deep place, and the mix allows them to be in the forefront, which I really enjoy. How many times you listen to an atmospheric black metal record and the vocals are absolutely buried in it? It's not the case here. They are in the forefront, but they still add movement to the overall experience. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about the dynamic between the vocals and sound is that the 2 feel like sometimes there are opposite worlds. The vocals have this darkness, this heaviness, this intensity to them, and the music is creating this incredible light atmosphere, this rays of sunshine that are peeking through the clouds that just makes the songs levitate themselves. And you have this incredible sound that's creating this beautiful atmosphere with great melodies, super melodic, very driven, but at the same time methodic, allowing you to really know how to digest really well that experience. And then you have the vocals coming in and showing the darker side of the band and the darker side of the songs and the sound. That is an interesting dynamic. You don't always see these two elements being that far apart from one another. They're normally more in line, and one is driving, they're each of them driving each other, but they're also taking something from one another and adding to the overall big picture. This record is very different from that point of view, because more often than not, you're going to feel a disconnect between what the vocals are offering you and what the sound is giving you. The two have different sensations, different moods. Having said that, they work so well because the beauty of the atmosphere of this album, the beauty of the melody of this album, the beauty of the sound overall of this album has pain, has darkness. There is a somber nature to it. Sometimes you can find beauty in something that's horrible or that's ugly. Like you can find beauty in death. This album has that in the sound. So when you have the vocals staying consistent from start to finish, you allow certain moments of the songs to feel more palpable when it comes to that darkness. So this ability to keep them separated or give you the sensation that they're worlds apart works really well, because once again, it's an element that creates movement, it's an element that creates fluidity, and it's definitely an element that allows songs to feel like they have a little bit of a heartbeat, expanding and contracting. Overall, this is a very interesting album. It's an album that just flies by. Albums like this that have this sort of dynamic, that have this sort of texture and sound, and how you perceive the sound, the impact that the sound has then on the atmosphere, and how the vocals interact with everything else around it, become a little bit of a burden if they go over a certain amount of time. It just becomes more difficult to see the forest from the trees the longer the records go. Keeping this album at 6 songs in 36 minutes is absolutely perfect for an album of this nature. The only thing that I would change is the passing. Not the song itself, but its place in the overall design. Outside of that, the album is magnificent. The album is nearly flawless. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I picked 3 songs that haven't been released yet. And the first one is Beneath a Sea of Stars. Very dark, the guitars are very dark, but they have a great texture to them. They help not just create the sound that you're going to experience, but define the atmosphere as well. They drive you with a single direction in mind. And then you have the drums. The drums are weaving in and out. Sometimes they're crystal clear, very solid, very warm, having a very distinct style and a very distinct sound, very different from what the guitars are doing. And then when they cross each other, they become bigger, they become thicker, but they become uniform. The two elements blend as one, and they're no longer two different pieces that are coming together. They're just unified under one single umbrella. That is the movement, that in and out movement of the sound is the movement of the song itself. This makes the track more engaging, it makes the track more fluid, it definitely makes the track more dynamic as well. On top of it, you have the vocals staying very consistent in offering the dark aggression, an approach that stays uniform from start to finish and allows you to feel like there's always a red line connecting the entire track, and that is the vocals, regardless of how much the song musically is expanding or contracting. This also allows the atmosphere to breathe in and breathe out. And a song that has a lot more atmosphere when the drums and guitars are away from one another than when they're coming together. But all of these elements create movement that feels seamless, that at times goes unnoticed, allowing the track to have a clear impact, but not necessarily being in your face in terms of how it's getting there. Next, we have the passing. Yes, the passing. This is an instrumental track, like I mentioned. It's a beautiful, atmospheric instrumental track. I mean, it has a great melody to it. It's a very melodic track. It's a very subtle track. It's a very light track. And this track is great within itself. But the only issue that I had is that I felt like it was taking me somewhere, and when it got to the end of it, I was at the same place that I started. I didn't move at all. It gave me the sense of movement, but when I actually paid attention to where I was still in the same starting point. And this is the problem, not that the track has, but that the track has in terms of where it's placed within the context of the record. But the song itself is a beautiful track that I honestly wish was the opening song of the album, because it has a lot of the atmospheric elements and the melodic elements that this record puts forward. Last but not least, Anew. This is definitely last because it's the last song on the record, is the closing track. and it's a very driven, not as much a very dark song. This song loses a little bit of its darkness, but it gains a little bit more of a drive, becomes a lot more grimy in terms of how it pushes itself forward. There's still darkness, but the majority of the darkness is coming from the vocal approach, the consistent vocal approach that you're going to see throughout this entire record. The song itself feels very light. It's a very light sounding track. It's a very melodic, very atmospheric song in terms of that brightness that the music carries forward, and then it has that darkness in the vocals that helps ground the song, that helps give the song at points a different feel, a different mood, a different vibe. But it never really takes away from how bright in general the song feels. A perfect ending to the record, because it allows you to feel a sense of progression from the beginning. It allows you to experience different emotions throughout the album without ever losing track of where you are. And this song comes together in a way that actually puts an exclamation mark on the overall journey that this album has. Perfect track to end the album with. The only way it could have been any better is if The Passing became the closing song. I honestly think they could have worked that a little bit better, but all around this track has all the right condiments to be the closing track on an album that sounds just like this one. This is it. Woods of Desolation, The Falling Tide, out December 9th on Season of Mist. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.